Welcome to my review of all 6 seasons of The L Word. Yes, I recently rewatched this series for the first time in 5 years, and I binged the whole thing. I didn't move for like 1 week. Yeah, that's as productive as it gets this year. Obviously, this video contains spoilers. The show did come out in 2004. God, that makes me feel really, really old. But anyway, if you haven't seen The L Word, if you've never heard of The L Word, it's basically a television show. It's about a group of lesbians living in LA and all their general hijinks. So as I say, I haven't seen the show in 5 years. We obviously live in quite a different world than we did 5 years ago. It's interesting to see what's changed and also what hasn't changed. I've actually changed my mind on certain things that I critiqued the show on in the first place, which was interesting. But it should be known that I absolutely love this show. It's one of my favourite television series ever, and I complain about it out of love. Okay, so, get comfortable and strap in, and let's do this. Season 1 is by far the best season out of the entire show. It's been 17 years since it first came out, and it still feels incredibly fresh to watch even today. The portrayal of women, their friendships with each other, female sexuality, lesbianism, the type of women that we're seeing on screen. It's just, I kind of agree with Eileen Shaken in the way that there really hasn't been anything to replace this kind of representation that we see on The L Word. Season 1 is just incredibly well written. All of the characters are incredibly fleshed out. It's all killer, no filler. And there's also some fun cameos from Holland Taylor and Guinevere Turner. Holland Taylor is Sarah Paulson's current bae, and Guinevere Turner was an actress in The Watermelon Woman, which is the first ever feature film directed by a black lesbian. So I like these little fun cameos in The L Word. The cast has an incredibly good energy. You believe that these women are friends in real life, and the chemistry's so good between these women that despite their differences, you really do buy into the fact that they're part of this friendship group. Season 1 just taps into something human, it taps into something authentic. And we also get to see a kind of level of lesbian domesticity, and it's just refreshing and it's wholesome. And my God, are they baby-faced in season 1. It's just adorable to watch. What's interesting is that the opening shot of the first episode in season 1 is of the character Tim. Now, Tim is a heterosexual white man. I think it's very interesting that a show about lesbians and a show about women opens with that. I think it's very telling about the state of the TV and film industry, and what I've read up on the earlier seasons of The L Word is that it was kind of like a Trojan horse, and they used certain elements to pander to a wider mainstream audience so they could show characters and tell the stories of identities that were more niche or had less mainstream appeal. And the first ever kiss in season 1 is between Tina and Bette. It's a T-Bet kiss. It's very cute and they're very baby-faced and wholesome. So let's talk about T-Bet in season 1. T-Bet is the pairing of Tina and Bette. They are my favourite couple. They're most people's favourite couple on the show. T-Bet are like an inhaler in a world of stifled heteronormativity that we're all forced to endure. But I have to say, I did not remember their relationship being so turbulent from the get-go, and there's quite clearly problems from the moment we're introduced to them almost. Bette is quite overbearing and dismissive towards Tina, and Tina just puts up with it. They're also going through a dry spell, which I find very hard to believe, considering they have chemistry which is so potent it melts anything that's within close proximity to them. Anyway, they both end up seeing a therapist called Dan Foxworthy, who is a bit of a lesbian icon, considering he seems to be the only lesbian therapist in this universe, and this kind of highlights the problems that they're having. I think it's interesting in this season that Bette's black identity is explored, and there's conversations around what it is to be a biracial woman. Bette is confronted by a woman with darker skin who is calling Bette out over her privilege. of having lighter skin, and there's conversations around black identity but to be white passing and all the privileges that come with that. But then there's also a conversation about biracial women feeling excluded from both black and white communities. So I just think it's really interesting that the show kind of chose to address that. So the topic of race in season 1 leads me on to Tina's reaction to Bette choosing a black sperm donor for their baby. There's a lot of discourse around this because Tina seems almost thrown off or shocked that Bette would choose a black sperm donor, which I don't fully understand when Tina knew she was dating a woman who has a black identity. And I find it a little bit hard to believe that there wouldn't have been an earlier conversation about this. It's very odd that Tina just assumed that their baby was going to be a white baby. And I don't like the way that she made Bette feel about it. It just... I know the show is obviously somewhat divorced from reality, but I feel like in reality that is a conversation that would have been had a lot earlier on. Also, when they take a random straight guy home so they can steal his sperm, I wasn't sure if like the unsafe sex aspect of that was okay. Also in this season, Bette preaches about monogamy to Alice, and she walks out of a dinner party because she's aware that there's something going on with Jenny and Marina behind Tim's back, and yet she goes on to have an affair herself. And if you're new to the L word, affairs are something you should get used to fairly quickly in this show. I just think Bette is such a daddy. She probably needs something on the side every now and then. I obviously don't want her in a relationship with anybody else outside of Tina, but I mean, if she has to, look, Jennifer Beals could make out with a lamp and I would watch it. I would support, I would science research. Bette and Tina also have an incredibly intense scene in the last episode of season 1. Not many people would be able to tap into that scene in the way that they did. When Tina confronts Bette about the cheating, I think it's safe to say that incredibly intense scene in the final episode of season 1 between Bette and Tina is the most intense scene in the entire show, in the entire series, and there's just such a mesh of emotions. There's hurt, there's anger, there's frustration, there's love, there's lust, and really the scene is almost like watching a rape in a way. It's very intense, and I think both Jennifer and Laurel did such a fantastic job. Of course, in season 1 we are introduced to a very baby-faced Jenny Schechter, my little baby-faced baby Jewish baby lesbian. She's very cute. Anyway, she's minding her own business at home, and then she sees Shane strip off and screw another woman, and the rest is history. Jenny is this naive young writer who is in a relationship with Tim. She's essentially adopted by the lesbians and has this whole new world opened up to her by Marina. Marina is very forward with Jenny. She knows about Jenny before Jenny knows about Jenny, kind of thing. And I just love seeing Bette give Marina the side eye in season 1. It's like there can only be one daddy. Mia's acting is phenomenal in this first season. It's really something else. I've said before, I think that Mia was the best actress on the show, and in season 1 this really kind of shines through. It's incredible what she can tap into, and I like Jenny's relationship with Marina. They're both very intense, kind of mysterious people, so there's an interesting chemistry there. The only thing is, we find out later in this season that Marina has a girlfriend named Francesca, and it seems like Alice and Shane knew about Francesca, but they never said anything to Jenny about it, which I thought was really odd. At first, I also kind of felt bad for Tim because obviously, Jenny was cheating on him, but it just became a bit of a toxic push and pull between Jenny and Tim, which kind of, I felt like maybe should have expired sooner than it did. Jenny and Tina have a very sweet relationship in season 1. I liked that Tina kind of takes Jenny under her wing, and Jenny quite obviously needs that. I think season 1 Shane is kind of attractive, and I just love how dykey season 1 Shane looks. Usually I drag Shane on this channel. I'm not a massive fan of her character, but season 1 Shane is... it was okay. Of course, Shane is this sort of Lothario figure. No woman can resist her. She gets through women like there's no tomorrow. And she also has a stalker who's not happy that Shane has slept with her and then kind of discarded her. I don't really know what Shane was thinking sleeping with her stalker, but what I love the most about Shane is her relationship with Alice and Dana, especially in season 1, because they bring such a nice comedic aspect to the mix, and the cast really are a lot of the reason why season 1 is so compelling to watch, because you really believe in these characters and you want to see more of them. I like the relationship between Shane and Sherry Jaffe. I think these two are actually quite similar because I feel like they're made for each other in a lot of ways, and I also feel like Sherry was the one who kind of broke Shane, or kind of left Shane with a lot of trauma. Yeah, it is a very toxic relationship, but it kind of just fits. Like, there's something about it. We're also introduced to Dana, who just has no problem dragging her friends. She drags Alice for being bisexual. She drags Shane for looking like a dyke. She obviously has a lot of internalized homophobia, and I think it's quite interesting to see that on screen. So one of the things I've kind of changed my mind about over the years with the L Word is I don't think the show itself was problematic. I think it displayed problematic attitudes within the lesbian community. However, it's just a reflection of the reality. So even though you might think that Dana's views are kind of problematic, it's also just a realistic reflection of some of the views people in the lesbian community hold, and it's also a kind of portrayal of that kind of self-loathing lesbian. And Dana has this whole kind of coming out process to deal with, so she's quite interesting in that way. She also works very nicely off of Alice and Shane. She just absolutely fits in perfectly between those two. She's also the only lesbian on the show to have a cat. I like Dana and Laura. I liked Dana and Tonya, and Tonya was very comedic, but obviously I think Dana belongs with Alice. This is kind of obvious quite early on. Alice and Dana just have such good vibes together that they work well as both a couple and a friendship. I forgot that Dana tried to hook up with Jenny in this show, and when I was watching the scene, I just could not stop laughing. It is possibly the funniest scene in the entire show. It's so awkward, and both women play that scene out so well. And finally, we are introduced to Alice in season 1, who just uploads everybody's sexual history on the internet. Because I think she's one of the most comedic characters in the show, she gets a lot of free passes where her behaviour is concerned. And it's also interesting that the show explores Alice's bisexuality and attitudes towards bisexuality in the lesbian community. As the show goes on, we do kind of see Alice's bisexuality disappear, but to be honest, as the show goes on, that's the least of its problems. My overall thoughts on season 1 is it's the best season in the entire show. It is fresh, it is packed with chemistry and interesting characters and a diverse representation of women, of lesbians, of different body types. It's incredibly well written and a very binge-worthy season. The characters are very much human as well, and season 1 has a nice balance of comedy and drama. Yes, it touches on serious issues, but it also is very light-hearted and just engaging and chef's kiss. It's incredibly authentic and human and unapologetic in terms of its portrayal of women. We're not only introduced to female relationships and female pleasure, but we're also seeing female friendship. And yeah, season 1 is just something that's very special. Okay, so season 2. This is where the theme song comes into play, and we never know peace again. But on the plus side, we get cameos from Gloria Steinem, the feminist babe of my dreams, Jane Lynch, the comedic queen of my dreams, and Sandra Bernhardt, who, okay, slept with Madonna, apparently, but who hasn't. Overall, season 2 is definitely one of the better seasons of the show. It carries a lot of what was good in season 1 in it. It's still exploring issues that are rarely seen in popular media. The representation is still diverse, it's still interesting, and the cast are as solid as ever in season 2. The worst thing about this season is all the t-shirts with the random phrases printed on them, and also the questionable echo whisper things that happen occasionally throughout this season. So I'll start my review of this season with Jenny. Mia's acting continues to be phenomenal in season 2, and we start to explore some of her backstory, where it's clear that she has a lot of unresolved trauma and her mental health really starts to spiral in season 2, and it's actually quite hard to watch. But what's lovely about season 2 is we see this friendship developing between Shane and Jenny, and they fit perfectly as friends because they understand each other on a level that most other people don't. Jenny's bad mental health seems to kind of be exacerbated by the arrival of Shane and Jenny's new housemate Mark, who is incredibly creepy from the get-go. I think Mark was brought in to kind of show the exploitation and the way in which men try to commodify and capitalize upon lesbianism, and the distortion that that has from the actual reality of lesbians. And it's this season that Jenny gives one of my favorite speeches when she's talking to Mark about how there's not one woman in the world who hasn't been intruded upon at some point in her life, and how sometimes it's benign or sometimes it's incredibly violent, but either way it's always there. And that's what's so refreshing about the show. It just says things that you're not going to hear in mainstream media very much. Jenny's relationship with Bert Connor was also really interesting. I feel like Eileen Shaken knows a thing or two about the Hollywood closet, but Bert Connor is obviously a reflection of what really goes on in Hollywood with especially male actors having to pretend that they're 100% heterosexual to secure the bag. Another interesting aspect about season 2 is the relationship between Kit and Ivan. I'm not actually sure how Ivan identified. They were very masculine presenting, and I feel like Kit was somewhat into it, to be honest. I actually shipped Kit and Ivan. I thought they would have made a really cute and interesting couple. Kit is also very chill. She has a very open attitude, and it was quite refreshing to see. What I don't understand is why Ivan felt the need to completely freeze Kit out of his life or their life and act like Kit was dead to them just because Kit saw Ivan naked and with a kind of female body. I guess I don't really understand gender dysphoria personally, but it did really feel like an overreaction, and it was something they could have worked out. Season 2 is also where we're introduced to Carmen, who has some real heat with Shane. I thought the chemistry between those two was very good, but I also feel like Carmen puts up with quite a lot of shit from Shane, and there's also this weird three-way situation happening between Shane, Carmen and Jenny. Jenny and Carmen are completely mismatched. I can buy that they would have had a kind of complicated relationship, but yeah, that pairing wasn't really working. Alice and Dana are finally together, and they are a fantastic fit. They work so well together. I love the whole friends to lovers arc. They were also the funniest duo on the show, but towards the end of season 2, we see problems begin to kind of arise between the two of them, which was really disappointing that the show didn't at least give the relationship a chance. And Dana just seemed to kind of check out with no real kind of explanation behind it. I think Alice and Dana is a perfect example of the show not knowing when they have a good thing and ruining it. Bette is fully off the rails this season. She is going through it. Her father dies after this whole back and forth about him not accepting Tina as her partner. Then Helena arrives on the scene and is also a daddy, and also ends up sleeping with a very pregnant Tina, which just causes Bette to kind of drown in self-loathing. I quite like the Tina and Helena scenes. As much as I'm a T-Bette shipper, I do like the scenes between them. They're incredibly tender and quite charged, and I feel like it was really brave of Laurel to show her body in the way that she did. And that's what I love about the L Word, the way in which they push the representation of women on screen. And, you know, seeing a pregnant woman as a sexually charged being is a part of that, you know. But that being said about Helena and Tina, it does not compare to the scene between Bette and Tina in season 2, and they are just something special together, you know. We get it, you're soulmates. Season 2 has some incredibly touching scenes. For example, after Tina gives birth and Bette is passing Angelica around the friendship group, it was just such a nice way to end season 2, and much in the same way as season 1, season 2 just taps into something very human and profound. I also think everything is still very much new and exciting in season 2, so you do feel a lot of the magic that came with season 1 in season 2. Season 3. Okay, season 3 is the tipping point for the L Word, and in my opinion, the darkest season of them all. I don't think season 3 is the worst season, but it's most certainly the darkest and most depressing season. My overall take on season 3 is that there just really wasn't enough comedy to balance out all the tragedy that was happening. It lost a lot of the lighter moments that season 1 and season 2 incorporated, and was just, I don't know what was going on with Eileen during season 3. But at least the soundtrack improves in this season, and we also get a cameo from Billie Jean King, which I just think is really cool. So Alice is off the rails this season. Going off the rails starts to become a bit of a reoccurring pattern in the L Word, but this season it's Alice's turn to kind of go off the rails. But this does give us the iconic Dana cardboard cutout scene. Alice is just devastated over her breakup with Dana. Dana has gone back to Lara. We don't really get the full picture of what's happened, just Dana telling Alice that it's not working out. And speaking of Dana, obviously this season we all know what happens to Dana. She gets diagnosed with breast cancer and starts treatment, and whilst her immune system is lowered due to the treatment, she gets an infection and she dies. I felt like Dana's death happened way too rapidly. I just feel like they maybe should have at least kind of drawn it out over 2 seasons rather than just cramming it into an already depressing season. I also think that getting rid of one of the core cast members of this show was a huge mistake, and that's why I think season 3 is a bit of a tipping point for the L Word. If you've got something good with your original cast, it's probably best to just keep them. You know, Dana helped make this show what it was. So, you know, and season 3, I don't know if this is just me kind of not projecting, but I don't know if this is just my own opinion and nobody else agrees. The whole of season 3 just had a very somber, sober atmosphere to it, and I don't know if it's just because the friendship group was being split up in real life. Like, I know it's acting, but I also just felt like there was an atmosphere because they knew they were losing Erin Daniels. Then we have Shane. She meets Carmen's parents and pretends to be a heterosexual, which was a whole choice and a whole thing. Season 3 is kind of where I really start to go off of Shane and her character, because this season she kind of has double standards for herself and for Carmen. You know, Sherry Jaffe gets chucked back into the mix and Shane has no problem having a flirtation with Sherry Jaffe, but when Carmen is seen like flirting with other people, Shane doesn't like it. And again, it's a communication breakdown because Carmen seems to think that they're in a monogamous relationship and Shane is just like, well, that's not my problem that you think that. And then Shane asks Carmen to marry her before leaving her at the altar, which is, yeah. So Jenny is back at home with her mum this season. She's in the middle of nowhere, and this is where she meets Moira. So then Jenny brings Moira back to LA, and Moira transitions to be Max. And Jenny is really supportive of Max's transition. She even offers to pay for his top surgery, but Max starts becoming really kind of like borderline abusive to Jenny, which I hated. Honestly, the character of Max was more interesting in terms of class to me than he was of gender in the show. If you see the way that Max interacts with the group, And then when they go to that kind of bougie restaurant and Max can't afford what's on the menu, you can see a real stark contrast between classes there. I think it's interesting that Kit gives Max this lecture about his transition when previously she had lectured Bette about questioning Ivan's gender identity and expression. Kit struck me as somebody who's quite kind of chilled out and just wants to let people be who they want to be, but the writers just chucked that in there. I don't think Kit's speech was problematic because it's just a reflection of how some people in the lesbian community feel, and that's fair enough, but it's just not in line with her character. I really loved Jenny and Claude together. I thought they were really well suited. Out of everybody Jenny's been with, Claude seems like somebody that Jenny would actually kind of go for, and they were hot for research purposes. Season 3 was the character assassination of Tina. Tina starts chatting to Daddy of Two behind Bette's back on the internet, and when Bette brings it up, Tina tells her it's for research purposes, which is what I say when I'm looking at pictures of Jennifer Beals' biceps. So Tina is back to being with men this season. She also hates Bette this season. And eventually Tina shacks up with Henry and absolutely nobody likes it. And it's odd when you compare the group's attitude towards Alice dating men to the group's attitude towards Tina dating men. Again, I don't know if it's just the writing or... Anyway, there's a lot of back and forth. T-Bet kind of use Angie as leverage against each other, and the whole thing is just it's a mess and was definitely a kind of character assassination attempt on Tina. Bette seeking out a silent retreat and then leaving and screaming is just I feel that on a spiritual level. We're also introduced to Dylan this season. I really don't like Dylan. I know she was playing a shady character, but I also just... Everything about Dylan just kind of oozes bad vibes. I don't know if it's the actor or if it's the character. I know a lot of people think the scenes between Helena and Dylan were really hot. I suddenly had dishes to do when those two came on the screen. So I say season 3 is the tipping point for the L Word. And in my opinion, it was kind of the beginning of the end, almost. You know, T-Bet are fighting. Alice is having a breakdown over Dana. Dana is dying. Shane's behaviour is pretty screwed up. She leaves Carmen at the altar. You know, this is the last season where we have the original cast all together. So something just shifts after this season. And there was just not much comedic relief. And yeah. Season 4, this is the beginning of Jenny's character assassination. Last season it was Tina, this season it is Jenny. This is the beginning of the end for Jenny. And season 4 is really where the show starts to just regurgitate itself in terms of story arcs. The 3 redeeming features of season 4 are Tasha, the basketball game, and the vagina wig. I like Tasha. I'm very glad they brought Tasha on the show. She seems to be the only character who has any morals on the show. And through Tasha, we get to look at the life of gay people serving in the military under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. You know, highlighting the discrimination that gay people faced, even though they were literally risking their lives in some cases for the job. And I actually thought Tasha was a good fit for Alice. You know, she seems really stable and dependable, and I think Alice needs that after Dana. And there was an opportunity for them to develop a really healthy, loving relationship. But it is the L Word, so that is forbidden. This season it is Shane who has gone off the rails. We've had Bette, Jenny and Alice go off the rails. This time it's Shane. Shane actually ends up looking after her little brother this season. She grows attached and then she meets Paige at Shay's school. I thought Shane and Paige were really, really mismatched. I think Paige was just used to show that Shane wanted to start a family, even though we know what's coming. We're also introduced to Pappy this season, and what I do like about season 4 is some of the lightheartedness and comedic aspects do come back to the show. I don't really get that Pappy was supposed to have this whole kind of rivalry with Shane, because the two women are quite different, so I don't know that it really works. But she's a nice distraction. I do not like Jodie and Bette. I don't like Jodie and Bette. This is not a safe space for anybody who ships Jodie and Bette. Jodie is a great character. I think she's interesting, but Tina belongs with Bette and there's nobody else allowed. I don't mind Bette having like affairs on the side, as I've said, but I don't want her in a relationship with anybody else except Tina. I like that they hired a deaf actor to play a deaf character, and I think Jodie and Bette had a kind of okay chemistry. I mean, obviously it doesn't compare to Bette and Tina, but I've never seen another couple on television that does. Anyway, Tina's kind of going off men and she's showing an interest in women again, and we get introduced to Kate Arden, who to me kind of looks a bit like Bette, which is a bit of a sign there. And we get the feeling that T-Bet are starting to kind of warm up to each other again, which we like. So as I say, season 4 is where the character assassination of Jenny begins, and this is where the audience really starts to hate her because the writers want that. You know, she euthanizes an elderly dog and tries to steal the vagina wig's girlfriend. I know Mia wasn't really happy with doing the scene with the dog. I think it was quite upsetting for her. And I think it was out of character. I don't think Jenny was ever supposed to be malicious. Obviously, she was very damaged. She was a bit out there. But season 4 was kind of trying to paint her as this malicious person. And I don't really think that was the character. To add to that, this whole Tina versus Jenny thing starts up in season 4, which again, they went from kind of a wholesome friendship and then Tina's trying to get her fired from her own project. To me, season 4 is where the writers stopped caring about the characters and were just grasping at ideas that would cause as much pointless drama as possible. You know, as I say, with season 4, you do have the lighter moments. You have Alice and Phyllis, which is quite funny to watch. And there's still a lot of good scenes in season 4, but I just feel like it's here this show starts to kind of lose its way by turning the characters into these really kind of horrible people and undoing the bonds that have been built between the characters. Okay, so season 5, this is where the L Word starts to slightly redeem itself. A lot of people like season 5, myself included. It may just be because of T-Bet. And even though the writers are out for Jenny's blood, she is incredibly entertaining in season 5. And we get some more fun cameos from Melanie Lynskey and the actor who was in The Monkey's Mask. The opening to season 5 is amazing and it just taps into some of that camp humour that we had in season 1 and season 2. Jenny is rewriting Les Girls is very funny. She also gets her movie back and then just turns into this prima donna that we all know and love and hate. And this is also where Adele comes in, and despite Adele being an absolute creep, I actually really liked Adele. I thought she worked really well off of Jenny, and the two had great comedy between them. We're also introduced to Nikki, who is playing Jenny's character in Les Girls, and then Jenny and Nikki start hooking up. I thought they had decent chemistry. I like these two together, but Nikki is just incredibly annoying. You know, Nikki gets a beard and then she cheats on Jenny with the beard. Then Shane cheats on Paige. Alice nearly cheats on Tasha. And Bette and Tina are officially having the hottest lesbian affair in the history of histories. So yeah, just a lot of affairs going on this season. Oh, and as a cherry on top, when Jenny and Nikki aren't talking, Shane goes and sleeps with Nikki, which I thought was completely out of character for Shane. I don't feel like Shane would have done that to a friend. We know that Shane sleeps around, but the point of Shane was that she was supposed to be a good friend, supposed to be a good person. She just had commitment issues. And Shane and Jenny were one of the strongest friendships on the show, but now Shane's behaving like this because the writers did it. This season is also where Shane meets Molly, and I feel like these two had quite a bit of chemistry. I mean, the actors hooked up in real life, so that's probably why. A little bit of gossip for you there. But the thing with Shane is whenever there's a new person on the scene, you know how it's going to end because the writers have overdone Shane being unfaithful time and time again. And then we see Phyllis dragging Shane across the coals over dating Molly, who is her daughter. I don't think Phyllis was wrong to say what she said to Shane. It's the truth. I really liked Helena and Dusty. this season. I liked it for science. We see Alice and Tasha running into relationship troubles in season 5, and what I like about Tasha is that she calls Alice out on all her BS, and Alice needs somebody to do that, because a lot of the times, as much as I love Alice, she does really problematic things. Like, a lot of the drama and trouble in the group is created because Alice couldn't keep her mouth shut, and Alice also outs somebody after she attends a private party. But again, with the relationships in this show, it kind of just seems like couples run into trouble before they've had a chance to even get off the ground. I hated Dawn Denbo, but that was the point of the character, so I think the actor did a fantastic job. I also have a crush on the actor's sister, who is Catherine Keener, who is I would sell, not a kidney, I'd sell a lung. I'd sell one of my lungs to be with Catherine Keener. She's unfortunately the straight sister though. Allegedly. There's still time, I think. Here's what I want to know, and if any of you guys have any thoughts on this, I really want to discuss it in the comments section. How much of Lay Girls was a reflection of the L Word itself? Like, how many parallels were there between the set of Lay Girls on the show and the real life behind the scenes drama of the L Word? Obviously, there's some real commentary there about how the TV and film industry works and the pressure to make lesbians palatable to a straight audience and make them less niche. Also, the fact that they want all actors to be seen as heteronormative and heterosexual was also another commentary. Anyway, never mind about all of this, because season 5 is where we get the very famous T-Bet kiss in Sheba, where Jennifer Beals breaks down crying unscripted during this kiss, and it is the kiss heard around the lesbian world. I'm guessing her character was just very moved in the moment for some reason, none of my business. Anyway, T-Bet go on to have a very charged love affair, and all is well until the affair comes to the surface when all the women are camping out together, and Jodie creates a revenge art installation piece, which is what Bet deserves, let's be real. I think there was some dispute amongst the cast and the writers with having T-Bet engage in an affair instead of everybody communicating in a healthy manner and Bet and Jodie splitting up and Tina and Bet getting back together that way. But I think from what I remember, Eileen just wanted the drama side of things. So a lot of people like season 5 because it does redeem itself here before it's the calm before the storm. Season 5 just taps into a lot of what we loved about the earlier seasons. It has a nice blend of kind of drama and comedy. There's some light-hearted moments. You love to hate Jenny. Bette and Tina are back together. Sparks are flying left, right and centre. I don't think any of the storylines were as intriguing as the ones in seasons 1 and 2, but season 5 is definitely a lot more entertaining. And those famous T-Bet sparks. Okay, so season 6. I think without a shadow of a doubt, season 6 is the worst season of the entire series. Where the hell do I start? I don't even know where to start. I mean, we do get a cameo from Lucy Lawless, but that is not enough to salvage season 6. Shane is in the doghouse with Jenny, then she's in bed with Jenny. I actually really like the idea of Shane and Jenny in a relationship, but not in the way in which it was done. Shane and Jenny had this really kind of intense bond with each other. They got each other on a kind of spiritual level. You know, they were both characters who had past trauma, they were working their lives out, and they were always there for each other, and it just seemed like such a wholesome friendship. And to be honest, I could see it kind of working out as a relationship if they had evolved to the point where they could be compatible in that way. But the show not only ruined their romantic relationship, it also ruined their friendship. And then we have Dylan, who comes slithering back into Helena's life, and we're not even sure if she can be trusted because they try to test her character to make sure that she's changed, except she already knew that they were trying to test her character because Jenny told her. And what I don't get about the whole Helena, Dylan and Jenny thing is they dragged Jenny into this in the first place, and then they got mad at her because Jenny told the truth. Tasha and Alice visit Dan Foxworthy Jenny, who is the only lesbian therapist in this universe, and he tells them that he doesn't think that they're right for each other. And then they meet Jamie, who becomes a cute third wheel who both of them find themselves kind of having feelings for. If this was the season that was supposed to kind of wrap everything up, I don't know. It felt to me like the writers didn't really care about what happened to Tasha and Alice as people or as a relationship. I feel like they were just like, chuck another woman in the mix and see what happens. The only redeeming feature of season 6 is that we get a fairy tale happy ending where Tina and Bette are concerned. Bette proposes to Tina and they're together. In my mind, T-Bette are happily married. I don't count Generation Q as canon. I just don't, unless they're going to let Tina and Bette be remarried in Generation Q. I just discount it for my own sanity. And of course, season 6, Jenny is found dead in a swimming pool and nobody knows if somebody's murdered her or if she's taken her own life. Some people think that Alice did it, some people think that Bette did it. Eileen Shaken said that she did it because Jenny was kind of the beginning and the end of the show. In my opinion, none of them strike me as murderers. Again, I think it was just a last kind of ditch attempt at trying to create some interest or speculation around the show. But just none of season 6 makes sense. They were such a strong friendship group and they all look absolutely miserable by season 6, and I don't think Mia loved what Eileen did with that character because she's been quite vocal about it online. So apart from Bette proposing to Tina, it was just a really awful way to end a show, and they just lost sight of all the things that made the show so special, which was female friendships, female relationships, the comedic aspect, and the serious issues that the show dealt with. And season 6 was spectacularly bad. It was not good. So overall, seasons 1, 2 and 5 were really the strongest in my opinion, and 3, 4 and 6 were the worst. Overall, of course, I love this show and it will always be something I rewatch every couple of years. The show was huge, you know, it completely changed lesbian representation on screen, and, you know, maybe that's for another video, but that's my overall thoughts on the series. Okay, I'm excited to get into some discourse in the comments section. Please let me know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe for instant disappointment, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.